Okay. Welcome to the December meeting of A.P.M.A. This is our full board meeting. We thank all of the board members and our guests today for attending through Zoom and to our public who are watching live through YouTube. I now call the meeting to order. I will do a quick roll call of the attendance. We do have a few guest attendees, so we'll be adding a guest attendee portion to the agenda momentarily. All right, my name is Stephanie Burdick Shepherd. I am the board president. Tech support is my other computer in the back room. Alan Brandt. Ashley DeBrun. We have somebody identified as capital C.
That's me, Heather Schwartz.
Thank you. Caroline Kosharian. Cassie Gilbo. Corinna Albright. Dan Skripczak.
Here.
Derek Munch.
Here.
Jody Fowler. Is it Jenny Martzel? Is that who's Jenny? Yeah. Katie Dietering. Heather Schwartz. Oh, okay, you changed it. Sorry, it just flipped on me. Kayla Coombe. Leah Wires. Here. Melissa Littleton. Matt Lederer. Maureen Russell. Michelle DePauli. Nicole Walkenfuss. Paige Noki. Rachel Smithman. Sarah Andrews. Sarah Scanlon. Sarah Strand. Tiana Beebe. Heather Schwallenberg. And did I miss Katie Sundstrom? Yeah, okay. All right. Did anybody not get identified? My participant list was changing as I was calling it. Everybody good? Okay. We always start each meeting with a reading of the mission. Appleton Public Montessori seeks to nurture the full potential of every child through the presence of the Montessori philosophy and all learning environments, encouraging intrinsic motivation and instilling a love of learning now and for a lifetime. I need to ask for approval of the minutes from last meeting. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Can I call for unanimous consent for approval of the minutes? Hearing none, we'll accept the approval of minutes from the last meeting. We now need to move to the approval of today's agenda. We need to ask to add guest speakers to address the board. This does not call for a board vote. We just simply need to do that. We'll put that right after the approval of the agenda. We are being asked to add board meeting protocols and process. I'm bringing that forward to add as an agenda item. Is there a second for that?
I'll second.
Is there discussion? I just need to go over the meeting protocols because we have so many of us today. Can I call for unanimous consent to go over board procedures in the meeting? Hearing no opposition to that, I'll move to add that to the agenda. It'll be number 5, board meeting protocol. Pardon me, I should probably make sure that I have the agenda up right now. I have just lost all of my Google Docs. Hold on just a second. Okay. Okay, I need somebody to help me out here. One of my, somebody on steering, perhaps I can make you co-host and everything else. It looks like I'm locked out of sharing my screen on Zoom right now. Can somebody do that? You're going to need to share the agenda, the survey, and the meeting, the model outline. And I do apologize. They're up on my screen. I cannot share my screen right now. I can make any one of you host who can do this.
I can try, Stephanie.
Okay, who was it? Was that Sarah?
It's Sarah.
Okay.
Bear with me. I'm new to the Zoom.
I do apologize. Let's see if we can find.
Let me know when you're ready, Stephanie. It says it's disabled for now.
Yeah, I need to go to the main computer that's running the meeting, I think, and give you all that permission. Hold on just a second. I do apologize.
I'm sorry, I don't understand it. Don't know what to say.
Survey.
Sometimes ad blockers can stop that too.
Right now, I'm getting our audio.
I wonder how I can get all of them up.
This is why I wrote it, in case you want to see it. Just wrote a thing about mass on.
Heather, I think if you could mute for now, just so we don't hear you, you're chatting. If you can't, then never mind, but.
Okay, Sarah, can you share now? Okay. Thank you so much. I'm not sure what happened. Zoom doesn't want me to play well today. All right, so what you're gonna need to do, Sarah, is add things to the agenda as we approve them. So we've added guest speakers as item 4. It'll be a new item 4 after the approval of the agenda. And we've added board meeting protocol as a number right after that. Okay, I'll let Sarah add that and we'll move to the next item that's being asked to be added to the agenda, which is coming.
Stephanie?
Yep.
It says I don't have access to edit the document.
Yeah. Okay, Cassie, do you have, or Matt, you should have access to edit this, yes? I do apologize.
I should. Well, so should Sarah, actually, but.
Yeah, Sarah should too. All right, Matt, you're in there. I can see you in there.
Yep.
Okay, so you can add these?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. All right, bear with us. We'll figure this out. All right. Okay, so the next thing being moved to add it to the agenda is coming from Tia Beebe. Tia, do you want to speak to what you would like added to the agenda?
Yes, absolutely. So I was looking to add a discussion on or a presentation of the results from the survey, as well as an opportunity for any of the board members to voice what they're hearing from the community at large.
Okay, thank you. So we can call that survey and board member communication. Is there a second to add that to the agenda?
I'll second.
Thank you, Derek. Is there discussion? I don't hear any discussion, so I'll call for the vote. I think we'll do this one as a roll call. It'll give us a good practice to do that anyway. Derek?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Sarah Scanlon?
Yes.
Stephanie? Yes. Leah?
Yes.
Kayla,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Paige,
Yes.
Nicole,
Yes.
Ashley?
Yes.
Okay, that passes. So we'll add that to the agenda. That will go right after board meeting protocol. Are there any other items that need to be added to the agenda tonight? Okay, hearing none. Sarah, could you bring the agenda up?
Will I be able to edit it or just bring it up blank the way it is?
Oh, so you're not seeing what Matt is adding?
Let me take a quick peek.
We may have to have Matt bring it up.
I see it. I apologize.
Nope, no worries.
Bear with me. Can you see it?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Sorry, everyone. I am struggling a minute.
That's okay. We can show this later to our children and they can make fun of us for being unable to work technology.
Can you see it now?
Yes, thank you. So I'll ask for approval of the agenda to move forward this evening. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Is there discussion? Hearing none, can I ask for unanimous consent to approve tonight's agenda? Hearing no objection, we will accept tonight's agenda. All right, I open the floor to our guest speakers. Matt, you can call the guest, introduce them. Dan, you will be our timekeeper. Thank you.
Okay, I am going to start with the, somebody was not able to make the meeting. They had a work conflict, so they contacted me and sent a letter that they requested be read. So I will do that now. Nothing that I have to say is with the intention to discount the level of hard work that students, teachers, administrators, parents, board members, or any other members of our community have been doing to and continue to put in on a daily basis. I recognize it and I see all of you. There continues to be a message sent to the community that A.P.M.'s plan must meet the needs of all of its families despite varying viewpoints on a model preference. In order for that to occur, compromise is necessary. That message has also been clear. Our family is very much in support of creatively meeting the needs of families in our community so long as all sides are compromising. However, the presented model is weighted heavily in the direction of a virtual preference. Everything a person writes or says and everything a person doesn't write or doesn't say has meaning, whether it is intentional or not. Language choice reveals biases, blind spots, and agendas. Again, intentional or not. Language has weight and meaning. The language used and not used in this plan suggests prioritizing certain student needs over others, specific modalities over others, and a lack of desire to commit to progressing toward a timely return to school. The proposed plan, with a notable emphasis on TBD, is framed as creating flexibility, but what it actually does is remove clarity and commitment. Our children are Montessori trained. They are critical thinkers. They are problem solvers. They have been facilitating virtual social hours all on their own for a significant period of time. Parents have been arranging outdoor social opportunities for engagement and connection since early fall. Our community has already been implementing phases of this plan. To suggest a plan with beginning phases that are already steps behind where our children are is disempowering. It is a disservice and insult to their needs and abilities. As a mental health professional, it is vital to stay abreast of current trends in brain science. I've said it before and I'll highlight it again, childhood brain trauma has to be a consideration here. We do not get to decide when something is or isn't traumatic to another person. The minute a child decides this is traumatic, it affects their neural pathways and crisis brain kicks in. I fully understand that not all of our students have entered crisis brain, but enough of them have, enough in our district have, enough in our nation and around the world have. It is unprofessional and unethical of mental health professionals to not speak to that. As licensed providers, we are bound by an ethical code of practice. As new brain science and epidemiological science continues to emerge, nationally renowned mental health specialists and researchers have highlighted the need to return to school. As the largest pediatric mental health agency in this area, which I have practiced in, I raise significant concerns about suggesting that Catalpa, based on feedback from one person, doesn't support a move to in-person instruction, and why that opinion is given more weight than nationally renowned practitioners. It is deeply concerning that the district within which we are supported has expressed concern for the negative impact this prolonged arrangement has had on its students, thus puts significant weight into mitigation techniques and strategies to begin to reintegrate students to the school setting, but that A.P.M. seems to be finding several ways that we can't, won't, or shouldn't attempt the same. I understand that returning to school will not be instruction as we know it, and that it will not be perfect. We expect interruptions. The risk will not be zero. It can never be zero. There will be adjustments and hiccups with inevitable sicknesses and substitutions. We will need to use unique strategies when coming back in person, and I expect some strategies will not prove beneficial, and we will abandon them and try new ones. Innovation and progressive strategies have always been one of the very unique benefits of Montessori, especially at A.P.M. There's something to be said for the environment that school creates outside of just delivering instruction. There's something to be said for creating a physical space between teachers and students in their environment, the shared energy in that space, and the so many levels of learning that sort of experience creates for young minds. That's from Katie Van Grol. And then our other guest speaker will be Heather Stone. So Heather, go ahead and unmute, and the floor is yours.
Hi there. I just have a couple questions and statements for the board meeting tonight. The first ones are regarding the Alliance Charter School update that was given in one of the latest emails. Given the fact that Alliance Charter School is another Montessori school in the area that has been offering both in-person and virtual options, I'm just curious as to what was the first date and the subsequent dates that A.P.M.'s principal or other staff member has contacted Alliance regarding their procedures and how they found success in the dual model. I also am curious because it also states in the Alliance update that they were able to get an exemption to allow volunteers in their school. And I'm curious, has A.P.M. attempted to get any exemptions for our school, given our very unique needs and resources? And if so, please list the specific exemptions that were sought, the date that they were sought, and the response from the district of each one. I also just kind of have a little addition to, it sounds like the same concern that Katie just voiced as far as, when we're regarding the safety and mental health portion of this. How current are the recommendations by Scott Radke as they are listed in the link in the priorities and rationale section under safety number 3, mental health? Have his recommendations been updated at all? And if so, what date were they actually updated? And then how much is A.P.M. using his opinion to determine our outcome of in-person school? And then the other question regarding what other options or opinions on mental health and safety are A.P.M. using? For example, the Great Barrington Declaration has 60,000 epidemiologists and public health experts and medical doctors that have signed on stating that it is safe that kids need to be back in school right now. Other studies that have come out months ago with 2,000 pediatricians stating the same thing. So my concern and question are, that Scott Radke's information and his determinations that we're using, are these actually really being updated? Are we using current information to use that to see if it's safe and best for our kids to be in school now? Let me just see, I think I have a couple other questions. I also have some questions regarding the plan to bring back the most struggling students as determined by the criteria in a recent email. The basic questions of, well, when will parents be notified if their student does qualify? what's the specific process by which the parents will be notified, and have any families already been notified at this point? And then my last is regarding the flexibility of APM's plan. Personally, I'm not comfortable with a plan that has no solidified dates as to when an action step will have to be taken. It will be very hard to commit to staying with APM when other schools have specific dates of return and ours is to be determined. Intent and action steps are two different things. And while it can be stated that the school's intent is to return to in-person as soon as possible, having specific dates that these action steps must occur by ensures that the actual steps to make it happen are occurring. There will be unforeseen hiccups that will need to be remedied, and if we don't have specific guidelines that force the hiccups to become known, then any one of those will continue to cause unnecessary delays to getting our kids back in person. I can understand that some flexibility might have to be built in, but more in terms of this date or sooner would be more the language I'd be looking for, not no date at all. Will APM commit to specific dates so parents can make the best decisions for their students? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We now move to board meeting protocol. I should pause. I'm sorry. This is in the board meeting protocol that I was going to read. We don't commonly have guest speakers, so board members may address guests and call for guests to speak at their will. So, so at any time during any point, a board member can call on a guest to speak from and invite them to the floor. Sorry if that was clear as mud. So I guess at this point, I'll pause and ask if there's any address to any one of the guest speakers that just spoke. Sorry for that little bit of hiccup. Okay, I don't see any hands raised, so I'll move to board meeting protocol. As we may have items on the agenda tonight that will require significant discussion, as well as clarifications of questions, I want to outline how meeting procedures work, just to help us be efficient, but also to make sure that we hear from everyone who wishes to speak. First, we have an agenda item, the model plan description, that may require clarification question time. The purpose of this time is to make sure that everyone has the same understanding of the plan itself. It's not meant to be a discussion time. To make sure that everyone gets to ask their questions, I will go around the room. I'll just call through the board list after the presentation to ask each member for their questions and allow the appropriate person to respond. If there are additional questions that board members have after this first round, then we will go to a more raise your hand model. But I wanted to make sure that everyone was on the same page regarding the plan before we moved forward. The discussion of the plan happens during the voting component itself. When an item is called for a vote and is open for discussion, this is the time when board members can and should share their opinions, voice concerns, share information, etc. In the discussion section, I'll ask for open discussion through the raising of hands using the Zoom bar and being called on by the chair myself. However, I will also make sure to do a final call to all the board members before calling the vote, unless it is called by the members themselves, to make sure that everyone has been able to voice what they need to. And lastly, I'll just reiterate what I just said before. We have guests present with us tonight. Guests may speak when invited to by the board member or during their allotted portion of the agenda. Thus, as a board member, you should feel free to direct a question to any guest, or you may simply ask for a specific guest to speak. Okay? Is that clear as mud? All right. I don't see any questions being raised in the chat. So our next thing on the agenda is a discussion of the second survey and an opportunity for the board to communicate things that they wish to from the community. And Sarah, would you be able to open up the family preference survey? Thank you. And Tia, since you raised this item on the agenda, would you like to begin?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was looking at the survey and noticed just some statistical differences in the way these were phrased versus the way that the other one was phrased. And I've spoken with a number of families who have voiced that in regards to how this was phrased, that they chose a virtual model versus an in-person model simply because of the original district's half-day model that they were proposing, because there was no way for them to accommodate that kind of a model. And so it goes to raise questions as to the validity of how many people are actually interested in in-person versus a virtual model, because there are limitations in which the half day creates a significant barrier for families to take advantage of that. So I believe in step 3, if I remember right, in phase 3, I printed it and I didn't. In phase 3 of what we're going to be talking about, that's brought up. But in regards to that half-day model, it just felt that percentage of virtual was higher than it would have normally been because of those barriers. And so the general discussion that I've been having with some of the members of our community is that there are a larger percentage that desire an in-person model because their children need it and their families need it. The mental health has been spoken to quite eloquently by Katie, and then again with questions asked by Heather, to help mitigate some of those other things that can influence the health of an individual and our children.
Thank you, Tia. Because the screen's being shared, I have to go through your participant, raise your hand, or you can unmute and speak if you wish to speak now. Okay, am I not seeing any hands being raised? Questions on the survey? Does any other board member want to share feedback from the community during this portion of the agenda?
Stephanie?
Yeah.
I had a question, I guess, for Tia. In the feedback you've been getting from parents, did they indicate if they put some of that feedback in the comment section, as far as they would have picked, they wouldn't have picked the virtual if it weren't for the half day challenges?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. So some of them had and some of them had not. Some chose not to comment at all. So it varied, I guess. So some yes, some no.
Yep.
Thank you.
I still think no matter what, I mean, even if there are a few families who may have put the all virtual as opposed to the half day, I mean, you're still going to have a pretty close race, if you call it, between people who do want to stick with virtual and, people who want their kids to go to school. So, I mean, I think you're probably, we're still going to be kind of a torn community, I feel. That's just my 2 cents, I guess. But I don't know if those numbers would really tip that scale all that much more. I don't know how many families you've talked to.
I want to actually second a lot of what Tiana had to say. It's a lot of what I'm also hearing from our community, that the change in the district's plan and what the district is currently allowing for their maximum amount of time that students would be in school significantly changes what families would be able to do in person. I don't, like, I understand what Paige is saying. I don't think that it would magically unify our community. There's still going to be a split. There would still be parents who want virtual, but I do think that it would account for a bit of what the change that we saw between the two surveys was.
I can also third that. Everything that most of what I have heard from families who have contacted me have also said that because of the short amount of time and also the many restrictions, like their child not being able to participate in group things with other children, having to physically distance from them, or having to wear masks and face shields not being an option. They also chose virtual, not because they don't want their child in person, but there's just too many restrictions, and then also not having that amount of time that made it worth the drive.
Dan?
So I certainly agree that with both Paige and some of our other speakers so far, one of the things I want to point out carefully here, and it's not to discount the importance of understanding what the community as a whole is looking for. That's been the whole point of trying to redo the survey, right? Was to try to get a better idea of what it is folks wanted. Of course, as the parameters of that change, and I think we can all agree that the district has kind of pulled the rug out from underneath us a couple of times in this process, that we're struggling as a community to kind of wrap our heads around what is actually going to happen. Right now, we're still speculating. We're saying, well, now that we've got this AABB plan happening on January 19th, we would change our vote. Well, it's not a poll, it's informational to start with to try to help us make an informed decision. But we're operating under an assumption that the district is going to, in fact, adopt that model on January 19th. And I just want us to be careful in the oncoming conversations, particularly when we're looking at something based off a very small sample size. So if I hear that I've heard from people on both sides of this debate and all across that spectrum that some of them didn't respond. With such a small sample size, a handful of people responding or not has a huge impact on percentages. Just keep that in mind. That's why it wasn't, it's not a referendum, it's informational. And again, to that final point, the fact that these numbers switched ever so slightly is indicative of the fact that we do in fact have a very split community on what people feel is in the best interest of the school and the community as a whole. And Dan, I'm going to follow you here. And with the survey, one of the things that steering even took a look at when looking at these results is a little bit to what Tiana had mentioned, is that, there seems to be some differentiating numbers between the two questions here. Those points are taken into consideration. So we realize this data here, and that was part of our discussion. And as we continue on tonight, I think I'm going to recap just a little bit, but hopefully you'll see that we do have very thoughtful discussion, and we don't all agree. But what we want to do is what's best for our community as a whole, listening to experts, our community, the teachers, the principal, and then trying to lay out a game plan to go forward. So I would say that, Tiana, your point here is heard and is definitely reflected in our conversations. And I would continue to say we should, once it gets to the discussion part of the actual plan itself, we can again bring this up and have that as a maybe a guiding point to help us throughout the night.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any more hands raised. So
Actually,
I
sorry,
will, oh,
sorry,
and
Steph.
Matt,
Just
go
real
ahead.
quick. So we're talking a lot about which model was picked, but for me, I think what I found interesting and informative is that last question. We're open to modification of the district model, and now we know it's switched from the hybrid to the full day, but that's a huge chunk of people, 83%, who said, yeah, we know we have unique circumstances and we can be flexible as a family, and we're open to whatever ideas you come up with. And for me, I think that made me feel better. I think we're more unified than sometimes it's feeling right now. That we do recognize there are problems and such, but that's 83% of people saying we see the challenges and we trust that the school and teachers are come up with a plan to express our strengths to overcome those challenges. So that's all I wanted to say about the survey. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to move on to number, I guess we're on 7, right? I can't see the agenda in front of me to call the number. But this is our alternative model presentation from our administrator, Cassie Gilbo.
Thanks, everyone. First, I just want to say that I understand there's a lot of stress and pressure. None of you signed up for this volunteer position to, have to put in this kind of energy, but I really do appreciate it. And I see everybody also working so hard, and appreciate the community input as well, as it's really helped us come up with a plan that we think is appropriate for our students and beneficial. So I'm just going to first talk about some of the reasons why we are leaning towards this plan, and then quickly present the plan. So the plan serves several purposes, and it allows us as a school to have some structure in a very unpredictable environment. And what I like about it is that because it's a phase, it's something that we can move in and out as the district allows us to, and as that we feel is appropriate. So we know our children work better when they are in a predictable environment, and it helps them feel safe and comfortable. An important way that we give that to them is through routines. It helps build trust. So allowing us to start in a phased in approach will give us opportunity to understand those routines, build the trust, and it will also give us as adults some predictability too. Something that wasn't originally part of the plan, but is new information, is that we would be able to start in phase 2, even on January 19th, if the district decides not to go into its model right away or postpones it. So this is a plan to get students back into school, and adopting this plan will allow us to do that on January 19th, no matter what. If you watch the Board of Ed meeting, they talked about the matrix and the metrics, and starting a conversation potentially on weighing different pieces of it. And, like was said before, I don't really want to be subject to last minute decisions anymore. I think that we could adopt this plan and kind of have an outline for where we're going. We can add dates. We can do those specific things that help us all understand. So in a phased in approach, it's kind of like going slow to go fast. So we can bring in the students in small groups and learn what they're going to need, and be able to predict and see and be more efficient in seeing what the needs are, and also seeing what the adults' approach needs to be. None of us have done this before. And we do talk to other schools, and we do talk to other people who have this in place. And we're learning that every building is different, every situation is different, and there's a lot of adjustments that need to be made. So I appreciate that you are recognizing that. When we can start smaller, we can make adjustments faster, and then we can also build the students' capacity and build those mentors, which is so important in a Montessori situation. So if we have one group, then they're mentors for the next group, and that just goes faster. That's one of the ways it goes faster. So I'm going to go through the plan a little bit here. Stephanie, I don't know if you're sharing or Sarah is.
It is now Sarah, so you can direct your scrolling commands to her.
Sarah, if you don't mind scrolling up so we can see. Yes, perfect. So I'm thrilled to hear that some of this universal virtual social opportunities are already going on. I think though we need to make those available to all of our students, and our staff can take that role on if we adopt this plan. The targeted support can begin, like I said, no matter what, January 19th, and that's a big deal. There's students who need to come in, and with our criteria, it also includes a parent request. So we heard that loud and clear as well. Keep scrolling. Thank you. The second phase also includes that outdoor social opportunity, and I know some of you have asked if you could volunteer. I did confirm that volunteers I'm not going to bring volunteers into the building. That throws off our number ratio, and frankly, I'm just going to prioritize students over adults, but I would love to have the volunteers outside, especially for some of those social opportunities. I would say that, phase 2, give us 2 weeks. I'd like 3, but I'll take 2 as a compromise. Phase 3, now we're going to bring in that second tier of targeted support. And I think it's important that we talk about the targeted support carefully, because although it might be a struggling student, they're beautiful, wonderful students with lots of strengths and gifts. And whatever reason we want to target their support, I want to make sure that it's positive. So I want to be careful on how we talk about that. It's not a foregone conclusion of why they're coming in. And like I said, it's also a great way to build confidence for students to be those mentors and those role models as more students come in. Phase 3, I would see that being about 3 weeks. And that would get us to a situation where we could bring in phase 4, where students were learning in their most preferred way. Probably there is a phase 5, but I haven't heard from the district. And maybe I'm wrong. I guess they're going to relook at their district model in 3 weeks to see if it can change at all. And I'm guessing that change would be the 5th and 6th graders coming in every day, but I probably shouldn't say, I don't know. So with that, I want you to know that this was a teacher developed plan. We know there are compromises. We know not everything works for every family, but there is something for all the families. I want to just remind, or my guidance to the board, because I know, like I said, this is there's a lot weighing on you in this decision, but my guidance and how I talk to the staff about things are you pick your priority, but there's also the other side of it. So right now I see you have 2 choices. I see we could start with the district plan. We all want the students in. I mean, there's no debate on that. This plan is a bring the students in kind of plan. When we start with the district plan, the focus will be on routines. So because we're all new at this, the focus of having all the students in will be on how to wear a mask, how to get a drink, how to stand in line, how to go to lunch. It will be like everybody's in kindergarten and we're all first-year teachers. So that's kind of the compromise on that plan. The focus on the other plan will be, like I said, going slow, making sure we have adequate time to prepare ourselves. We have the tools to be able to support the students. We can put targeted interventions in place. We can put social interventions in place. And in the end, we have a more complete plan faster. So whatever you choose, we're going to do an amazing job. We have a phenomenal staff. They love your children. But there's two different choices with two different compromises. And I just want to be open and honest with each other about what the compromise is, and can we live with that? So after that, I think I already talked about the opportunities to volunteer. I do want to share a little bit more about the Children's House Plan, because I know that has been a little vague, and we've been able to talk with Children's House families a little more. Here again, when we decided what to prioritize, we decided that for our youngest learners, that relationship with their teacher is going to be our top priority. So instead of doing the split in models, we are going to keep the kids with their teacher, and the teachers are going to do a creative job of in-person learning and virtual with many of your ideas, some live streaming. We will have some para support. We are able to hire Children's House para, which has been a vacancy, and we have another para vacancy out there already posted. So I just want to remind you, though, we don't have 2 full-time teachers, so there will be some differences in the schedule, but if students in the other grades are full day, we know that's a priority to have families on a similar schedule. And just another reminder that when we're prioritizing the children to stay with their teacher, there might be some pieces of instruction that we have to put to the side in order to figure out that schedule. But I just wanted to give a little clarifying, some clarification on that. With that, if anybody has any questions, or I don't know if Stephanie, you have to direct the questions.
Yeah, I think it's easier if I just direct the questions, and I won't use the voting order because steering has had an opportunity to ask many questions, and so I really want to turn this first set of questions over to the rest of the board. So I'll just start from the top of that list first, and then we'll get back to steering in case there's outstanding questions as well. So Leah Wires, you have the floor for questions at this time.
Beautiful. Thank you, Stephanie. So I actually have quite a few questions. I've spent a lot of time in the past week talking to our community and kind of gathering their concerns regarding the plan and what has been put forth as far as information goes. So my first question really is, what steps, Cassie, does the school plan to be taking between phases, just to make sure that we are progressing through those phases?
Yeah, I'm going to share. Can I share, Stephanie, my screen?
You should be able to, but if you can't, let me know.
Oh, of course, that's right in the way, isn't it? Hang on. So, I mean, again, this is happening very fast, right? So trying to think about the timeline for a safe return and the differences and the steps that we'd have to put in place. You know, so like I said, in a phased in plan, we're targeting small number of students. We're looking for adjustments in our school routines, adjustments in our approach. We're adding the social opportunities, we're providing the learning. Just for a side note, we have a low sub concern, which is a concern that we've been talking about a lot. If we did the district model, we would be having all students come in, we would be making school-wide adjustments, school-wide adult approaches. We would be providing the virtual learning, and then our sub-current concern would be high. Like I said, about 2 weeks for that. And this is not a complete list. This is just our start of this. Phase 3, in a school plan or in the phased in plan, we bringing more students in for instruction. Student mentors would be available, adjustments would be made. We'd be ready to implement for the new group. We'd continue seeing what adjustments need to be made, continue to provide virtual, continue in the social opportunities. The sub-concern there would be medium. And the sub-concern is, you know, the more students we have in, it's harder to be creative in covering the students that are in person and keeping the numbers in the safety guidelines the district has set out for us. If we're doing the district plan, again, we have all students in, which you know is exciting. We are continuing to make adjustments, but maybe in more specific student routines, specific adult approach, implementing targeted learning, providing that virtual learning, and then the sub concern remains high there. So those are some of the things we're starting to figure out as far as what steps we'd have to have in place. But I think probably the timeline is what you're looking for mostly. And, you know, it is exciting to kind of see spring break there at the end. Like we're going to get there by spring break, having all the students in, if the district will allow that, you know, like Dan said, without this phase in a plan, we're just still waiting. So this plan at least gives us a guide to start going and getting somewhere.
So to clarify what I'm hearing then is that your hope, as long as the district goes through and allows students to start going back on the 19th, is that your hope would be to phase 4 by spring break?
Yes.
Okay. My next question. So with that then, with them going back full days, would we for sure be starting at phase 1, or would you be looking at possibly moving forward through phases before then?
That's a good question. And I'm not sure how to do that with board protocol, but I do feel like we could enter at any phase. And as long as we have the phase plan adopted, we could make adjustments through the plan instead of, I guess that would be an advantage to adopting the plan. Then we don't have to keep coming back if things are changed on a district level. But I don't know if that's something you as a board can say, like kind of pick where you want to start.
And then I guess my last question, it is more of an explanation question. So I know that the rest of the district has been doing Virtual Plus for some time, where they've had targeted students back and older grades have been allowed co-curriculars. Is there a reason that we didn't start that sooner?
So part of the Virtual Plus included support for EL students. Our EL teacher didn't have any need for any of the EL students to come in. The second piece was through a guidance counselor. Currently, we don't have a guidance counselor. And the third piece was our special ed students. So our special ed teacher went through that with her students and made that plan accordingly. The last piece of that was for Virtual Plus was the directive to not use classroom teachers because the priority was to continue teaching virtually. So in many essence, we didn't qualify for much of it, but essentially that's what phase 2 is for us. And because of this plan, so I was able to solidify with the district that we could do that even using our classroom teachers on January 19th.
Okay, I'm sorry. And then just one last. So my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, so what it looks like written out is that January 19th, if the district goes back, what it looks like in the plan and how it's written out, and I think how some parents are understanding it, is that the district could be back full time and we could still be hosting social hour, is what I'm hearing and what the concern is that I'm hearing. And I can understand that concern as a parent, that we might still be having a social hour for our students while other students are back full time. So is that a possibility?
Well, phase 1 and phase 2 start at the same time. So the students will still have the consistent virtual learning happening in phase 2. And then we can bring back the small group of students that we want to target for the various reasons to get them started and to get us started.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kayla?
As of right now, I don't have anything to say.
Thank you. Michelle, you have the floor.
I have several questions, kind of a few for each phase. Do you want me just to kind of go through them each? Okay. So I've also heard from the community, both sides, some people who are really eager for kids to get back in person as soon as possible, some who still really want a virtual option. So I guess one thing had a question of clarity on this is there still a virtual option throughout all of the phases, or does the virtual part of it get weaned out, or how does that work?
There's still a virtual option through all the phases.
Okay. All right. And then for phase one, the universal virtual support, will that be available to families who want to stay virtual, even if the district goes back in person? Or was that more just for if the district stays virtual?
It's part of the plan, so we would intend to implement it if the plan was adopted.
Okay. Let's see. So then for phase two, on the original plan, and I think you answered this already, Cassie. I'm just looking at my notes. At the original plan, it said, or when district allows in person, but you're saying we could actually start on phase two even if they don't. Okay.
Correct.
All
So
right.
that's a change.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then regarding the criteria, under phase two, the second part, it kind of talks about the SST team. Forgive me, what does SST stand for?
Oh, good question. Student support team. So it includes our school social worker and school psychologist, and then any special ed staff.
Okay. So if a parent requested their child returned for some reason, then they would be working with that team to develop a plan for that?
That could be part of it. Usually the teachers bring students to that team when there are concerns, and we develop a plan from there. So a scenario that might happen is, a teacher brings a student with a concern and we decide, what, I think in-person learning is going to support them better. Let's invite them in.
Okay. There was a place under the criteria, I thought, though, where parents could request that. Is that?
Yes.
Okay. So would that then be, would they also be working with that team, or would they just be working with school staff to determine whether they were invited in or how that would work?
So we haven't developed all that, like the protocol for that, but it could go through any of us. It could go through me or the teachers or the team. I would say they'd probably approach me or a teacher and say, this isn't working. I think my child should be in person, and then we'd have a discussion.
Okay. Okay. A lot of these you've already answered, so forgive me as I go through my notes. And then also at the end of the phase two, number 8, it says the steering and administration will monitor the movement from phase 2 to phase 3. So does that mean that there won't be another board meeting or vote on that will just be discussed and that plan will be taken care of with staff and steering committee? Is that how I'm understanding that?
Yeah, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we wanted it to be a collaborative effort, or have an opportunity for one or either of us to say, let's move forward.
Okay. And I guess, part of my question is that the board doesn't have to get together and have another discussion and a vote every time
you
want to move a phase. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
As much as you like meetings, right?
Right. How about on the flip side of that, if parents or the community are feeling it's not going fast enough, is that something that they can, how would they just come to the steering committee or the board president with that, and then you would take that into consideration?
Go ahead, Stephanie.
I can answer that, Michelle. That was actually something that steering brought forth as an amendment to the plan during our steering meeting. So
Okay.
we added steering would be in consultation with the move to phases precisely for that reason.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and then as far as with phase 4, is it the feeling that anybody who would want to be in person can go in person? We have the space and the staff and everything to do that, or
Yes.
if we get to that point and we have more bodies than space, is that going to be an issue?
No, we figured out a way to have all the bodies in our school with mitigation strategies and, social distancing protocols.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
Mm-hmm.
Paige, you have the floor.
Sorry, technical difficulties. So Michelle asked kind of one of my big questions, and that was about the virtual aspect. So there's always going to be a virtual option for any parents?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, and then I guess as far as how that works, do the teachers have the technology to say, record whatever they're talking about in class, and then the students at home will be kind of real time with the teacher, or how is that virtual going to play out?
Well, this is where I feel like we really get creative with each level and try to use the strengths and also recognize some of the limitations. So each level might look a little different, but all ideas are on the table. So we could use some live streaming, we could use some recorded lessons, we could use some synchronous time and asynchronous time.
Okay. And then I guess, a lot of this is based off of what Michelle was asking. So for phase 2, the students that you bring back, obviously the students who have, there's some challenges that they're dealing with, just with our, and I know that you had talked about that some parents, they say, I really want my kid back in school. If it's 50% of our population, is there a cap on people, like students that you're going to allow back in the school in phase 2? Or like certain requirements, I guess, instead of just, I want my kid back in school, are there certain requirements that'll have to be met?
Well, that's why we have that criteria list.
Okay, maybe I didn't see that, sorry. Okay, and then the other thing is, so as a board, if for some reason this plan that you're proposing, if we would vote no, does that then automatically default to like the district settings? Just like in the district meeting, they voted down both A.M., P.M. and the AABB, which ended up defaulting back to, Plan C, which is even diving in, head first more than taking a kind of more strategic approach to returning the kids. I guess I'm curious, if we vote no, does then that fall back on whatever the district's plan is, full 5 days a week?
I would have the board answer that.
It actually defaults to what we voted for in October, which was, I can pull up that language. Well, I can't actually, because apparently I can't share my screen right now. But it would pull back to our vote in October, which was the district plan. But there were the caveats that we would take a 2-week transition time to get to the district plan. And that there may be some structural differences depending on staffing and space, which was primarily Children's House, again, which you see in phase 4. So those structures are outlined in phase 4, but it would pull back to our vote in October.
Okay, that's all I've got. Thanks.
Thanks, Paige.
Stephanie, could you clarify, was that a hard 2 weeks or was that a if needed 2 week transition that we had?
It was stated as an if needed. So yes, thank you for that clarification. There was an A, B, and a C. I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me at this moment. Okay, thank you, Paige. I'm going to assume that Nicole and Ashley do not have questions for the board at this time, or yes? Okay. Heather Schwartz? Floor?
Nothing.
Katie Sundstrom?
I just had a clarifying question. I don't know if I missed this in some of the documents. So in the phase 2, that initial group of kids coming back, is that all day? As if the district allow, if that's what the district doing, is it all day?
So that would be a change. So when we originally wrote this, the district hadn't changed plans, so it was listed as half day.
Okay.
If we go back and they go back, there's an option to change it to all day. I mean,
thank you for clarifying.
Let's see, and Tia Beebe, you have the floor.
Thank you. Awesome. So if we pass this, it's my understanding that we're going to start in phase 2 no matter what. How quickly, I'm assuming if we pass this, spring or winter breaks coming up, so students would not be notified until after winter break, and probably I'm assuming before that 19th time period, correct?
Right.
Okay. And if we don't adopt it, then it goes back to our October. And I guess I'm unclear on what I think I might have even missed that board meeting because I had to work. And so is there a way for us to find out a little bit more what that was? Or does everybody understand? I don't know. I don't understand it.
Matt, you can probably pull that up, right? Yeah. Okay. We can get that to you, but let us give it a moment so that Matt can pull up the actual language.
Absolutely. So most of my, in phase 3 for the universal instruction being provided, and that's going to be all virtually, correct?
Yes, except for, let me just. So yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. And I'm assuming that's minus the children who are going to be in person because of needing the extra support.
Right.
Okay. Most of my other questions were answered. I had a number of the questions that had to do with the district stuff, but those I sought on my own. Sorry, I'm just going through. Yeah, the majority of my other questions were answered already. So no matter what, here we go. If we adopt this plan, we are going to be starting in phase 2, not stage 4 on January 19th, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, and then I believe all of my other questions were answered from the other individuals.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tiana.
Kayla, you said you had a question.
Yes, sorry. So when it comes to the current virtual plan that we have, how is that going to change when other students are going to be in person? So for example, like if there's an afternoon class that's in person, then will there no longer be a virtual in option at that time?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that is a lot of teacher planning that, depending on the outcome of this, would have to occur. So there might be some changes in your virtual schedule. But in the end, we have E2, which will be, they'll be doing their teaching through Canvas for everybody, if they're in person or at home. Obviously the people in person, you know, have that different experience, but because all of our students are at an age that they can access the technology, we felt that was the most appropriate and able to keep us in a situation where we have a virtual option and an in-person option. In E1, we're going to split. So we'll have one teacher be the all virtual teacher and one teacher be the in-person teacher. Because we're only splitting at one level, this also allows us to really target our resources there if we have a lopsided class. And then in Children's House, they'll be using some live streaming with read alouds, some paratime to meet. So those Children's House virtual schedules might switch around a little bit to try to make the schedule work. Does that answer your question, Kayla?
I think so. So then in the case that, say, student or students are sent home then due to a cough or whatever, would they just be required then to log in like they would if they were all virtual? Would the curriculum be easy enough to go back and forth, or how will that work then?
Well, you know, luckily we've had this time and this experience to practice. So just like when any student is sick, you know, the teacher will make a plan for that student. The difference is going to be at E1, where, you know, E2 and Children's House are already kind of engaging in that both model by the same teacher, but E1 wouldn't be. So that's where we're going to have to put some extra resources. So if, you know, one of the E1 teachers has a student in person and they are sick or they need to go home and quarantine, then we'll have to figure out a way to meet their needs at home. But we do want and intend to meet their needs at home if they're at home because they're sick or quarantining. I mean, I was just going to say, it's a really ambitious goal, a really ambitious plan. And I'm proud of the staff for putting it together and willing to try it.
Okay, and then I do have another question too. So what is the reasons why a child might be sent home then? Like, is there certain criteria that a child has to meet 2 out of the symptoms of COVID or 1 symptom? And then for how long, or would there be a test required to come back? Or how do you determine when a child can come back to school after being sent home?
Yeah, there's a whole list on our district website I can send to you. Katie Deering, our school nurse, was here, but she had to leave. So she can definitely get back to you with all those details.
Thank you, that's all I had.
Cassie, if I could chime in, I believe those were posted on the A.P.M. Friends page today as well.
Okay.
I know I saw them somewhere, and I'm assuming that's where it was.
Yeah. I have a clarification on what it happens if we don't vote a plan. What it does is it pulls us to our October vote. Our October vote requires us probably to then approve a plan. And the plan that has been put forth that aligns with our district plan is phase 4 of this model. So we would either have to choose to vote tonight on that, or we would have to re-vote, I believe. I am not an expert in how these things work. But I believe that's what it pulls us down to, is that it gives us not a plan, because it asks us to think about how the implementation of the district model would occur. Now, the admin has given us what that would be, which is phase 4, but we would have to vote on that. Is anyone on steering able to help me clarify that? But that's what I believe that's what our options would have to be.
Dr. Brandt is here. He could help answer that question for you, Stephanie, if you want. Dr. Brandt,
I could call on you as a guest to clarify that.
Sure. Kind of going back to the health question, basically any of the COVID symptoms, a student will have to go home or should be staying home. So, for example, right now you hear that I'm kind of stuffed up. That's one of the criteria for a student that would keep them at home. A sore throat, a cough, a runny nose, a fever, any single symptom, they're going to be sent home based on district protocol.
thanks, Al.
And Al, can you clarify what happens if we don't have an option tonight? If we voted on an option that in October, that our school would have an option with the district model, would we then have to vote on the district model plan?
Yeah, if you don't vote for something tonight, then you're living with whatever you voted in October.
Okay. Thank you. Steering. Oh, what? Did I miss somebody?
Nope, you're good.
Okay. Sarah Scanlon.
I did have a few extra questions. Cassie, regarding what if families decide they want to change their mode of instruction choice now that things overall are different, period. Everything's different than it was in the fall. Is there a deadline for that?
So far, we've only asked your preference. After the decision tonight, we would go ahead either way and ask your decision. And then we have not made a plan to allow if that would be able to be changed or not.
So as a clarifying question, I have to ask, does that mean if a family chose virtual in the fall, you have to allow them to make a different choice? You can say, no, you can't make a different choice. Is that what I'm hearing, or am I misunderstanding?
No, I would want to give everybody a chance, an opportunity to make a choice, knowing what our plan is. I think being a parent myself and being put in a situation to try to choose without knowing the plan has, given me enough experience to feel that you all should get a chance to pick what you want when you know the plan. And we're small enough, we can do that. It's a big district, has different things they need to worry about.
And I'm curious to hear what challenges you foresee with both the phased-in plan versus the district model plan of just going with what the district wants.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So with our plan, I feel the stress and the pull of not having more students in sooner. With the district plan, I feel the chaos of all the students and all the teachers trying to figure it out all at once, with never having to do it before. So again, there's pros and cons to each, and whatever the choice is, we'll do the best we can, but there's the compromise side that we all have to understand. When we're in the district plan, the students will be here, but it will be about setting routines and teaching and reteaching and learning and changing. And when you're in a bigger group, it's harder to see. It will be like you're trying to take the layers off. With a phased-in approach, you're putting the layers on, and you can see where the needs are faster, in my opinion. But again, that comes at a cost of, are we willing to compromise with our students home a little bit longer. Some of
And
them.
final question, I just want to be sure I'm understanding the staffing situation properly. Regardless of any of these plans, we will still have some teachers who will need to remain virtual. Is that correct?
Yes, and this plan does account for that.
Playing off that question, is it already determined which teachers are going to be doing virtual and which ones will be in person?
Yeah, the teachers are working with the district and getting their accommodations approved.
Okay, because you said like for E1, it was going to be one teacher virtual only and one teacher in person only, meaning, for example, I have one in E1. So my child might not be with his teacher if he picks a certain one. Is that correct?
Correct.
And do we know which teacher that would be possibly?
We're still finalizing that accommodation.
Okay, thanks.
Due to the time of the meeting, we have a rule in our bylaws that full board meetings cannot last longer than 90 minutes without approval of the board itself. We are nearing that time, so I'll need to ask for a motion to extend our board meeting time limit as we have not moved to the discussion components yet. Do I have a motion and a second?
I'll motion.
I'll second.
I know that this is important and that our board takes things seriously, so I think I can probably call for universal consent at this point for this. Hearing no objection, the motion carries. We will extend this board meeting till, I guess we can do it in half-an-hour increments. That's actually not stated in our bylaws, so we'll do a half an hour for at this moment.
Can I just clarify something for Kayla and maybe provide a little bit of understanding for everyone? By the time you have to make a choice, you'll know the teachers if they are needing accommodation to remain virtual.
Thank you, Cassie. Sarah, was that the end of your questions?
It was. Thank you, Stephanie.
Matt, do you have questions? You have the floor.
Yeah, just a couple clarifications. Apparently our 4.5-hour steering meeting wasn't enough for me, so I've added to that here. So one of the things that I'm hearing from the community, interestingly, and I think you've kind of covered this already, is both sides are saying, yeah, but they don't have to compromise in this plan. So people who prefer virtual are saying the in-person people are getting in person, they don't have to compromise. And the in-person people are saying the virtual people still get to keep virtual, so they don't have to compromise. But I think you've kind of covered this, right? Like the virtual is going to be different. There's going to be less, if you were maybe meetings with teachers and whatnot. The in-person people obviously have to compromise maybe with a slower start. Am I accurate on that?
Yeah. I mean, I think what we're asking our staff to do again is a lot. And so some things might have to be set aside for a little bit as we learn and grow and figure it out. And that will be a compromise for everyone. Okay. But like I said in my video, having access to the Montessori teacher is one of the key components to Montessori education, and our mission, we set out to provide that Montessori education. I think we all agree that virtual Montessori is not what we would want. And when you come back in person, it's not going to be as Montessori of an experience either. I mean, the other two pillars we work with is freedom of movement and freedom of choice. And that's part of why going slow makes sense to us, because you have teachers who their whole philosophy is teaching the kids to have freedom of movement and freedom of choice. And the kids grew up with freedom of movement and freedom of choice. And now we have to come in and those two things are basically taken off the table. So it's going to be compromise on both sides. Okay.
And then the other thing, I know one of the things that we discussed a lot at the steering committee meeting was that in order to pull off the in-person, we need to maintain the virtual options so that when people are potentially sent home or quarantined or whatnot, there's not a gap in their learning. Is that still the, you know what I mean? So as long as we need a virtual option to, as a stopgap for that, if it's up and running for everybody else, we're not really taking away from our capacity or ability to provide in-person learning. Is that accurate?
Right. I mean, that's again the beauty of what you all granted us in the beginning of the year to practice that virtual model. So we got used to it and a little bit better at it since that was new. And we will always need a virtual piece because of the quarantining and like Dr. Brandt mentioned, we're going into flu and cold season, and any cough or sniffle, kids will have to go home. So how will they engage in learning if we don't have that virtual model going?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Dan, you have the floor.
Thanks. So I've got a couple of questions, and mainly because of the changes that have occurred since our last steering meeting. So I guess I'm a little bit confused about the directive that we've gotten now that allows us to do our phased in approach. I'm happy for it because I think it's overdue, and it's a good thing that we've gotten that new directive that says even if the district does not choose to go to the A.P.M.A plan on January 19th, which honestly I think is very much up in the air still. Green Bay, which Appleton often follows suit, just voted to remain 100% virtual. So I don't know that is, I do think it's a real consideration. So previously we were operating under the understanding that the district would not allow us to have sort of a virtual plus model of our own because of the reasons you outlined earlier. We simply didn't qualify because of the, all the reasons you talked about earlier. So we've gotten them to move on that. I guess my question is, with the full day, K through 4 and the AABB for the 5-6, is the phased in model, once we get through the phases, do we have that same wiggle room that the district is giving us now to essentially be slightly less restrictive than they might end up being? Do we foresee any wiggle room in bringing the 4th graders onto the same schedule as the 5th and 6th that are in the same mixed grade classrooms? That's question number 1. I'm worried that I struggle with the messages we're getting from the district changing, first of all, which I'm glad, in this case, I'm glad they have, but I want to make sure that we're not setting ourselves up to then to go through this process and then be told later, nope.
Yeah.
And I know that's a risk no matter what, but I guess how confident are you that if we do the plan that you're recommending, which steering is recommending, that we'll be able to follow the plan have we gotten any reassurances that we'll be able to follow the plan without significant changes happening from the district level? We could continue to be nimble.
Yeah, the reason why we can enter into phase 2 no matter what is because the other schools have gotten that option to bring a small group of students back. So I have been assured that the other phases will only be able to open up if the district opens up.
Okay,
so
that's helpful to know.
We could be stuck in phase 2, but at least we're in phase 2, you know what I mean? And not still in a holding pattern. Fourth graders, bringing them back on a hybrid schedule would be more restrictive. And I don't have a answer for you, except when I asked about that, there was some talk about, how would it look if all the other fourth graders can come every day and ours can't? But I think as a board or as a school, if that's what we wanted to do, we could pitch it, but it's not what we want to do right now. And our E2 teachers have a phenomenal plan and are very excited to have the fourth graders there every day. We talked about that move from E1 to E2 is a big jump, and to give those fourth graders a little bit extra, again, having the trained teacher there, the person who, knows the Montessori, and so we would want those fourth graders in.
Okay, that's helpful.
Dan, Tia has a point of clarification that she'd like to raise for you.
Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify for the board and for the community at large that while the district has set and gone to the default plan of resuming K through 4th on a full day schedule and 5 through 12 on the AABB hybrid model, that is still not a set in stone plan. They're meeting again on January 11th to make the final decision to go forward on January 19th. So there is still a chance that they could say we're staying virtual. And I think Dan was trying to allude to some of that, but they're still, and if they do decide that, then things aren't going to move forward for us at all. With regard to moving into phases 3 and 4, if the district as a whole decides not to move forward on the 11th.
But what I hear you saying, Cassie, is that even if they decide to stay 100% virtual, because of the equity issue around being able to have virtual plus in the other schools, we would be able to start at least in phase 2.
Yeah, Dr. Brandt, as long as you're on, do you have any other information on that being or insight?
Sure. So with the virtual plus is really built around having up to 30% of your school population, or working up to a maximum of 30% of your school population back in your school. So, in the scenario of if you choose a phased in approach, whether the district comes back hybrid or not, you could start bringing in groups of kids not to exceed 30% of your school population. That's kind of like your cap. So, you'll have to kind of decide then, what does that look like? Do you bring in some kids like in the afternoons? Do you bring in kids for full days? Is it 4 days a week, 5 days a week? That's all for you to kind of figure out the nuts and bolts, but 30% is the cap, the ceiling. And I think, a couple people have reiterated this, and I think it's been lost in large part for what a lot of people are hearing, but I'm going to reiterate it because I keep telling my parent population the same thing, is that if you listen to the district, and if you look at what's in writing, they talk about they're planning to start hybrid on January 19th. They're targeting January 19th. They're hoping for January 19th, but there's nothing concrete saying we're dropping dead and we're starting January 19th. And I think there's two things that will interrupt the start of hybrid on January 19th. One is if there's a surge in COVID and the hospitals are on the brink of, not being able to handle what's happening in the Fox Valley. The second thing that I think that is the deal breaker is staffing. And it's kind of the same reasons. I mean, as we approach the cold and flu season, if a staff member has 2 symptoms, a runny nose and a sore throat, I mean, historically, we go to school and we still teach, and people just plow through that. But under the pandemic, they have to stay home, they have to get COVID tested, and then they're going to have to wait a couple days to get that result. So, there's high probability that more staff are going to be missing days. The flip side of that is we have a much smaller sub pool. And I don't know if Cassie's shared this information, but as administrators, we get a daily report on sub failures. And only about 20% of the district employees are like face-to-face with kids at school, working like in special ed programming or the classroom connection programs, working with the Boys and Girls Club and the YMCA. And with that limited staff, our district had 40 sub failures today. And we average 25 to 30 on any given day. So that's with 20% of the population, and that's how many sub failures we have. And so I think that we're not in a place yet with enough staff in place to be able to like open fully in hybrid and have enough adults just physically sitting in a classroom with kids, let alone having qualified teachers.
I can clarify that the Department of Public Instruction has recently made an emergency ruling allowing student teachers to serve as substitutes, because there is across the entire state such a lack of substitutes to fill the teacher positions that they are allowing student teachers to take sub jobs in their classrooms. All right. Thank you, Dr. Brandt. Derek, you are up.
Thanks, Stephanie. Oh. Yeah, just making sure I'm off mute here. So on behalf of A.P.M.A Steering Committee, I'd like to start off with saying thank you. Thank you to the APM community for your patience during this ever-changing and challenging time. Your resilience and willingness to adapt to change put forth on you and your families from AASD and A.P.M.A is commendable. The stories that were shared by our community almost 2 weeks ago still weigh heavy on our hearts. Stories from parents gradually seeing their child emotionally change for the worse, to kids or family members with serious medical conditions that this virus puts at serious risk. We also have heard of families where one parent had to make the decision to change their work schedule to second shift just to accommodate the new school schedule, therefore taking away precious family time and even leaving that child missing their loved one throughout the work week. And unfortunately, we also heard from parents who felt the need that they needed to sign their son and daughter up for a different school, even though they knew that A.P.M was the best place for their child's educational needs. We, as a committee, do not take these stories and the many more like them lightly. This is why we consistently ask for the community's input. We have spent countless hours in thoughtful debate, considering all aspects of the community's needs. We've also listened to the input from the school administrators and educators regarding staffing needs, building limitations, academic performance. Then we have to take all this information and make it fit inside the ever-changing box that AASD gives us. To say that's a challenge is an understatement, but we feel that this is a challenge that A.P.M is built for. We have an opportunity to put the Montessori virtues and values we hold dear into practice, being a light in the time of this darkness. And our A.P.M community, our state, and even our country is divided more than I've ever seen, all too often focusing on what we don't agree on versus what we do agree on. We all want to keep our kids safe physically and emotionally. We all want to provide our child with a Montessori education, sorry, Dr. Brandt, filled with the love of learning, values, and virtues. Now is not the time to divide our community. A house divided against itself will fall. A.P.M is a school that is founded on the belief that we all make mistakes and that all children and adults want to do well. and we have it within us to do so. We're about to discuss the plan presented tonight, and I wanted to fill you in on steering's last meeting. The first proposal was to go all virtual. While this proposal worked well for some, we knew that it no longer worked for others. We unanimously voted no to that proposal. The next proposal is what steering is bringing forward tonight in our discussion. And in full disclosure, as we talked about, this was not done, or this was done before the most recent AASD change. But we had long, and thoughtful, and sometimes even lively debate. We asked many tough questions of the administrator, the educators, each other, and it finally came time for a vote. And it was not a unanimous vote. When the dust settled and the debate was over, we knew that we needed to move forward united. After tonight's discussion, now hearing the proposal, and discussing once again the changes that AASD is throwing at us, we hope we can come out of this united as a community. We may not like everything that is proposed, but if we focus on what we can agree on and the Montessori virtues, we can be an example for our kids and our community and show why Montessori is so special. Thank you.
Muted. Are there any outstanding questions for Cassie, the staff, members of steering, guest with us tonight from any board member? Tia?
I do have one other question. So there was mention that Alliance was using parent volunteers in some capacity. What capacity are they using them in? And why did they seek an exception to receive aid from the community?
Well, I don't know all the policies and rules and regulations of their district. You know, it's a different district than we have. The story that I heard from them was that volunteers were not allowed but because their Montessori school has no other help, the district granted them some parent volunteers. I don't know everything that the parents are doing, but a couple of the things that they shared with me was they're making materials for the teachers, much like the materials that our paras can help us make here and send home.
Okay, so there would be no need for us to facilitate any other, because we have the support that we would need as far as that kind of thing is concerned?
Well, the need is actually to help with the social opportunities, to get a kind of a schedule in place. That's actually our greatest need. And that's where we heard a lot of concern from our families that they want more social opportunities. So we wanna target that and prioritize that for volunteers. Again, for outside volunteering.
Okay, thank you.
Cassie, or I'm sorry, can I ask a follow-up question to that?
Michelle?
So one of the concerns I did hear from the community was the timing of the social activities at the end of the day. Is there some flexibility in those being at different times of days to accommodate different schedules, or is there a reason why it needs to be in that last hour?
We would have to build a master schedule. We thought the end of the day made sense because then people go home. But we are always open to suggestions. Again, it might be one of those things that we know it doesn't work for everyone, but we're trying to put it out there as an idea of here's how we're going to try to fulfill this need for our students.
Dan?
I think one of the things to consider is when the kids leave the building to do this social activity during the day, which obviously would be ideal if we could accommodate that. But when they come in, all of the protocols of hand washing and everything else have to go into place. And by the time then you're really cutting down on time to do other things that I think most of us, are at least partially expecting to be happening. So just keep that in mind. It's not, we know it's not ideal to just only have it available at the end of the day, but that's a big, it's a big ask when you're, especially E1. It takes a long time to get those kids through the protocol. At least initially. After a few weeks, maybe they'll be pros at it.
Okay. Did I see Paige? Did you have your hand up? Yes.
Yeah, I just like a couple thoughts and then maybe a question for Dr. Brandt. You know, I guess in all these meetings that we go to, I sometimes worry that we never really, like, no one talks about the reason why we started virtual to begin with. And the whole reason is because there's a global pandemic going on around us. And, you know, certainly the burden rate is much higher now than it was, you know, in August when we were looking at going back to school. I guess I just worry that we were kind of forgetting that, you know, there are people who are getting really sick and there are people who are still dying out there. And, you know, I love that we've got a plan, you know, in our back pocket for when things do look better. But I just worry that as a community, I think we're kind of forgetting about like why we're doing this to begin with. So I guess with that said, I wanted to ask Dr. Brandt, you know, just as far as district, I mean, if you have any inkling on, you know, kind of their decision, you know, I guess metrics that they use to base on, you know, whether they're coming back or not, have those metrics changed over the last 4 months? You know, what is like current burden rates? Like, do you have any kind of more information about those kind of things?
You asked the $1 million question. So I think everybody has asked that a lot of times in terms of, you know, everybody wants black and white numbers in terms of what's the new cutoff. And you haven't heard the school board or the central office give you a solid number. And I think the reason is because back in August when they kind of set some arbitrary numbers, they didn't realize how high COVID was going to go. And at the same time, over these months this fall, we've learned a lot. I mean, yep, the COVID rate has skyrocketed, but we've also learned some things by seeing other schools in practice and what the safety protocols are happening in local school districts and around the country. I think some of the things that we don't hear about is some of our local school districts, you know, how often are classrooms or schools being closed for a week or two, and then coming back, or a classroom closing for a week or two and then coming back and then closing again. I think the one advantage that we've had being virtual for a semester is that we've had at least some continuity of instruction where we're not been bouncing back and forth and trying to, you know, scrambling because all of a sudden we're closing shop for 2 weeks. So I think even though the COVID rates are much higher right now, I think we know a lot more about what we need to do to keep kids and staff safe. Again, I think personally the two biggest factors that would hinder the district from coming back fully hybrid was if we see a big spike in COVID after the holidays, and or I think even the bigger concern that I have, at least for my school, is the staffing component.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, I mean, that's part of the reason why the option of remaining virtual was given to steering, because I mean, we have one teacher right now and she is half-time at A.P.M. and half-time at another school. And that's a small school, but it has, you know, I mean, I guess we all know it's Maureen. You know, she's having to sub all the time and people are not there and not present. And you think about our school and the lack of resources that we have. And I know we want to talk about what we can do, you know, so just a reminder that not having adults able to sub, and especially you're not going to have the consistency of the Montessori teacher, that's a huge concern.
Leah, you had your hand up, and then Sarah.
Yeah, so I guess I just have a couple additional questions or a couple clarifying questions. So one of the things that was stated was that when we look at pushing through to a next phase, or if parents have concerns about how quickly or how the lack of progression to the next phase, that would be something that would go to a steering meeting. In the future, for those steering meetings, will those be open meetings if you're making decisions in them and taking votes? Are those open to the public?
We take votes in steering all of the time. They're traditionally not public meetings. The minutes are public.
Okay. And then I know I've heard from other schools and other charters within our district that when they do go back, their in-person learners will still be on devices, learning from devices. Is that something that we're going to also see at A.P.M. with our in-person learners?
Yeah, so again, we're going to try to use as many ways as we can to meet the needs of the students. And there definitely be times that we'll have to have them in person on a Chromebook, especially because some of our staff will have to remain virtual. They might have to stream in. Canvas E2 is going to utilize that Canvas platform. So they'll be accessing some of the material on Canvas. So yes.
As a day-to-day though, will they be sitting at their assigned spot on their Chromebook?
We're going to have to make that plan. It's not, I think, I mean, and maybe if there's staff who want to jump in for what they see, but I don't want to put anybody on the spot. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm fumbling right now, 9 o'clock. That's not our preferred method, and it's not the way we want to do business, but there will be times that students will be in school on a Chromebook, more than usual, because of
usual is zero.
When you're having like the lack of movement and the materials that we need to worry about sanitizing, we have to use some Chromebook time.
Okay. And then another big question that I've heard, does this plan apply to this year only? Will it be revisited for next year? What are the time limitations on that?
That's a good question. I don't know.
I am not sure. I would imagine that this is, in my mind, I guess I was imagining this would just be this year, and that a new school year would entail a fully new board vote. I mean, that would, I can't imagine making a plan this year that this board would vote on that would be in continuance to another year.
I would argue, can I be recognized?
Sarah, do you want to cede your time to Dan at this moment?
I do.
I had one more question.
I'm sorry. Dan, can Leah ask her question and then you can respond?
Sure.
And then as far as making up time that our learners have missed or information that they've missed, I'm sorry, is A.P.M. going to be looking at doing any sort of more targeted summer sessions this year? I know in the past it has kind of lacked. Is that something that we'll be looking at to make up for regression?
The summer school plan is that A.P.M. students can attend any neighborhood school. So we haven't changed that plan as of yet.
Dan?
So I just want to encourage maybe somebody, if that's a real concern that it's unclear whether or not these changes we're voting on tonight extend beyond the 2020-20, easy for me to say, beyond this school year. I assume the chair might be willing to accept a amendment for consideration to include that in the, specifically include that in the plan. Don't let that be a determinant.
Thank you. Sarah?
Cassie, in steering, there was a question regarding temperature checks and whether or not we were able to do temperature checks for children upon entry. And you said you'd have to look into that. Was there any, did anything come of that? Do we know an answer on that?
Yeah, so I was able to talk with our nurse, Katie, about that. She said that we would have to consider the device. They're not as reliable as she would want them to be. Also, the original reason why our district one of the reasons it went away from it is the fever is a later symptom of COVID, and she worried about kids coming in the winter and hats on and rosy cheeks and kind of being a little hotter. So she said if we would go that route, if we could get the thermometers, we would have to do double checks. So students would come in, if they had a temperature, they'd have to wait in the health room and do another check. So there's options. She did not recommend it, but there are options.
I myself had two questions. Is it okay if I ask them? I would like to hear from any teacher. It might be more on the younger children, but I would like to hear from a teacher on how a phased-in approach works best for children at this developmental level. I could recognize any teacher, but I didn't want to put anybody in this. Jody, did you want to be recognized? That would be.
Well, I'm usually sound asleep right now, so I apologize if I cannot make a complete thought right now. But looking at the phased-in approach, I think it's going to help our children immensely if, like Cassie said, we can stack on these skills that they're going to need to learn in order to put all the safety measures in place. It's going to be a lot of teaching of routines. And I just imagine how excited they're going to be in their home away from home again, and all that excitement and energy that's just going to come piling in on that first day. And I just feel like we're going to have to contain that energy. And if we can start in small increments, it would just be immensely, immensely helpful. I just think it's going to be really hard to contain it all, really hard. And it's going to be hard for us too, because I just want to hug them all, and I just feel like we have to start low and slow, low and really slow. And in March, when we were sent all home, it was just such an enormous task as a staff for us to even imagine like where to begin, how to do it. And we weren't even online with them. We were doing our Facebook calls and or our FaceTime and phone calls, and we weren't even on Canvas. And learning all of that over the summer, it was just such a crash course. And I am overwhelmed thinking about going back and just having this crash course of all these safety measures that are being put in place for us to keep everyone safely distanced and to teach all the kids all of this, and the mask wearing that they're going to have to do, and just things like bathroom breaks and staying apart in the halls and all of these things. It just really seems overwhelming to have everyone come in at once. So I think it's going to be much more manageable if they do come back, if we do start the slower phasing. I think of safety first. So that's how I feel too. And just the consistency, I just would hate if we started and then we were all gone in as far as like out of the building because of too many of us back at once and we didn't do it right. And then they were all back home. I just feel like it could be like this. If we just jump in with 4 feet, so to say. So developmental wise, I think they've all been home for so long. So I feel like for some of them that could be a real emotional tug too, like jumping in. I think of that emotionally for them being away from. I just think it needs to be a low and slow process.
Thank you. Maureen, could I recognize you to talk about the youngest learners?
Sure, I can. Can you hear me? These are my new fancy headphones. I guess it really replicates what we typically do in the beginning of the year for Children's House. Those of you who have had kids in Children's House know we've always had a staggered start or an orientation for our children, and that's even in a typical year. And what Jody was just saying, I guess it just reminded me, you know, we have 4-year-old students, half-day students who've actually never been to school at all, let alone, I mean, they've been virtually with us, but they've never been in a school building, never separated from parents yet. And, you know, our all-day friends, our kindergartners, they really only went, you know, until March last year. So it will be, I just think there's a lot of needs that some things we don't even know yet. As Cassie mentioned, I work at another building in the afternoons, and I just I do the Virtual Plus, and just seeing them, and they're young as well, not quite as young as Children's House, but just how it's been, they're still adjusting. This is our 3rd week. You know, the masks are off more than they're on, and they forget about being close. I forget. And now it's getting more real, like they're there, and there's more of the typical just missing home, and this isn't really fun. You know, they thought it would be really fun, and now it's real. And I don't know, I'm tired too, so I hope I'm making some sense. But I guess the phased-in approach to me replicates, it's just Montessori. It's just honoring all our families, all our children, where they are, and taking things slowly and adapting as we go, because it is unknown territory. It's really new for all of us. And we will just have a lot of things to work through. And I am extremely confident in our staff, and in our kids. Our kids have really been doing a phenomenal job. I think Rachel and Ashley would agree. It's just, gosh, I'm losing my train of thought here, but I feel confident that the phased-in approach would feel less like a crisis coming back. It would feel more natural for them, and kind of maybe for families too, to have that a little bit of time to get used to everything again. I know my own kids, you know, they're anxious to go back, but it isn't the same. So I think all of this, just taking in all of these things into consideration, this phased-in approach would just honor everyone where they are. I don't know if Rachel, if you wanted to add, you always speak so beautifully about child development, but thank you.
Thank you. I need to ask for another extension of the meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
I'm going to call for unanimous consent on that for another half hour. Hearing no objection, the motion carries. The meeting will extend for another half hour. Please make sure to stretch your necks and look up just for a second. I won't make Corinna lead us in a song, but I'm quite tempted to, because I love her songs. All right, Dan, do you have a question? We are still in questioning. Or was your hand still raised from before and I'm sorry. Zoom makes you have to erase people's hands. So I'm sorry.
My question got answered. Thank you.
I've lowered your hand. Okay. Are there any additional questions from the board members? Okay, hearing none, we move to our voting items. Our voting items are, we are voting on an alternative model at A.P.M. I think, Sarah, it would be good if you could bring this back up for us. I'll read it. I have the agenda up in front of me in print. The alternative model at A.P.M. phase process for in-person instruction with modification to virtual curriculum. The steering committee brings to the board a recommendation to begin a phased-in approach to in-person learning. At this point, because we can begin this phase, we may need to change the vote, but I'll just read it and then we'll make those amendments as needed. When the district allows for in-person instruction, targeted date January 19th, 2021, and to continue a modified virtual A.P.M. option modified to allow for in-person learning, and that increases social learning opportunities open to all students led by staff. Dan.
I would like to make it before we. I can't. I'm sorry. It needs to be brought. It needs to be seconded.
Yes.
And once it's to the floor, we can make an amendment.
Yeah. Can you
So
please?
I'd like to second that. Or did somebody make the motion? I'd like to make a motion to bring that to the floor.
Thank you. I need a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. We are open for discussion, which can include amendments at this time. Dan.
I would like to amend the language of the question to read: the steering committee brings to the board a recommendation to begin a phased-in approach to in-person learning as soon as the district allows, and to continue a modified virtual A.P.M. option. In other words, we're being told by the district that they will allow us to do this despite whether or not they go to hybrid. So as soon as, rather than allows for in-person. So as soon as the district allows us, or A.P.M., or however we want to write that, but we need to make that change so that it's not dependent on January 19th.
Is there a second for that amendment to change the wording to in-person learning as soon as the district allows for in-person instruction?
I would second that.
Okay, a couple of seconds on that. We are open for discussion on this amendment. Hearing no I don't see any hands up. Hold on, I'm checking that quickly. Hearing no discussion on that. Dan, do you have a discussion?
I do. I'm sorry, I was unclear. It's late. I would get rid of in-person instruction.
Yes.
Okay. When the district allows us to, or allows A.P.M., period.
Thank you.
Or technically semicolon.
Please don't make us amend semicolons. Allow us to have the grammatical errors. Okay, so we're open for discussion. I would like to amend the amendment to also include in this wording for the school year to end at the end of school year 2020, this school year. Is there a second on that amendment?
I would second that.
That should say the 2020-2021 school year.
Yes. Okay, so we now need to vote on those two amendments, I think, to continue moving forward. I think maybe these are small enough amendments that I can call for universal consent on the ending of this school year 2020 to 2021 school year. Can I call for unanimous consent? Not hearing any objection, that will stand. We go to the amendment, the first amendment, which is that the steering committee brings to the board a recommendation to begin a phased-in approach to in-person learning as soon as the district allows A.P.M. And then the rest of the vote. Can I call for the vote on that? Can I call for universal consent on that? Hearing no objection, that will stand. So the vote has been changed. We are open for further discussion.
So my question specifically maybe more towards steering, in light of our short last meeting that we had, all 3, 4, 5 hours, whatever it was. Maybe it's still going on. With what AASG came out with, has any of your opinions changed on what we're bringing forward tonight?
Mine has not, because Cassie and the staff has not. So,
Yeah, the more I ruminate on this, the smarter it becomes. And I think, you know, as steering, we had the advantage of that meeting and got all of our clarification questions earlier. And so we've had longer time to kind of digest it. And the more I think about this, the better it looks to me. It seems like it's taken a lot of the questions and a lot of the concerns into account already and kind of built those in, so that we can not quite, but operate at least more independently from the district than we had been from the, I believe it was actually, so the September vote was actually the one, not the October vote, where we had passed the language with the 2-week buffer. So yeah, those are my feelings. I think it's a smart approach, and we get to where we're going, and we take into consideration the staff's expertise with our own students.
My opinion hasn't really changed so much, as I would argue that I'm much more relieved by some of the information I heard today. My biggest concern, again, was, and the reason I encouraged the steering to vote against the fully virtual option, was because we definitely, there isn't equity in the idea that A.P.M. kids who are targeted for intervention, essentially, who need that extra help, weren't getting it under the lack of virtual plus model for A.P.M. The fact that this allows us, and we've gotten confirmation from the district that even if they don't open, it allows us to do that, which is overdue, and is the right thing, the ethical thing, to be able to have those kids who need that intervention to get it. I feel much better about that. That was a huge concern, and I'm glad that we've gotten to that point.
I have to echo that, Dan. And I think it's really easy for us to throw that word around, like targeted intervention. And I was compelled when Cassie described it to us at steering, which is that, you know, it certainly will take into account what a parent is seeing at home. And so, you know, Cassie, maybe you could even speak to this even more, but you said, look, a teacher might see a student turning in all of their work, and so may perceive that everything's fine. But Cassie said that, you know, they're knowledgeable that the parent may be seeing something completely different at home, and that criteria takes that into account. And I think it's true that this is why I also voted against the all virtual option, because I do think that some children require and need in-person instruction. Leah, you had your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. So I actually have a couple of things. When this plan first came out, I was very iffy about it. It's very, it leaves a lot to be interpreted. And I still am very hesitant about it without having any sort of timeline or dates attached to it. And I know that you can't necessarily put a date on every phase, but not having an end date on it, or not having some sort of formal criteria on it, makes me nervous because there's a lot of potential that we could sit in a phase for an undetermined amount of time as it's written. So that's very concerning to me. I also had I'd emailed about a letter that I received from a parent that was written by a student, and it was recommended that I share it at this point in time during our discussion. So this was forwarded to me from a student or from a parent. Her student is in E2, and following some discussion that was had in class this week, he had come to his mom that he was having some really big feelings about some discussion that was had regarding going back to school, how the district is going back to school, and the safety that may or may not be surrounding that. And that left this young gentleman very, very concerned about things. So his letter is this. It says, I have been thinking a lot about school lately. There are a lot of things that I can be doing right now, but I'm fighting for my right to go to school. I have been wondering why we can't go back to school when other kids are. I feel left out because I can't see my friends and teachers. Why don't you want kids back in school? Haven't we had enough time at home? I feel disappointed because I'm missing out on learning things that I can't learn at home. I'm not learning as much at home as I could if I was at school. As parents, you should have experience with kids and listening to their ideas. Why shouldn't you listen to them now? I don't feel like myself because I'm not able to be with my friends and teachers. I miss them very much and I miss learning. I don't think it's fair that every parent doesn't get to vote on whether or not we go back to school. Why don't kids get to vote too? Why don't we all plan this together? And why doesn't our school agree with the school district? If I can come back to school, I am willing to wear a mask inside and outside, stay stationary and less collaborative, and not play with things other people have touched just so that I can go back to school. I would pack my lunch every day if I had to. I would be willing to learn new rules and new ways of doing things just so I can be back at school. I want to go back to school because I like seeing my classmates and teachers and I like being with them. They make me feel happy that I get to learn new things because they help me and support me. It's easier for me to learn things at school than it is at home because the teachers there are actual teachers, unlike my parents at home. My parents are trying their best, but they still don't know the right things like teachers. I was afraid to share my thoughts because I thought I would get in trouble. Thank you for listening, Everett. So that was shared with me, and I thought it kind of spoke a lot to what our concerns are. So I've heard concerns about our students not being able to move around or not being able to work like they're used to. I've heard concerns about them learning new routines or their willingness to follow those new routines. And I think that this young man speaks for, at least my children as well, in saying that these are all things that our students are more than willing to do when they're back in school. So those don't necessarily need to be concerns that we're discussing. Like kids want to learn, kids want to be in school, and they know that it's going to look different.
Thank you. Leah, did you have thoughts about amendments regarding a timeline or suggestions in terms of moving from phase to phase?
And that's great. That's a great question. So I think that Cassie's document that she had shared, when I had originally asked this question, she had a table that she pulled up that had 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks with that spring break goal line. That was very reassuring to me. And I don't know if that's something that we can figure out how to incorporate into that plan more before it's passed, but having some sort of goal line or some sort of date there, or at least some dates in which it will be re-examined, would be reassuring for parents.
Can we put a date on it with the district not having really a date, knowing that it's going, like, I'm just asking, are we allowed to? Are we allowed to give dates given that things will change at the district?
And that's kind of why I had said that maybe putting some dates that it would be reviewed might be a good start.
We could certainly put those timelines in as review components at this point in the meeting. We would need to ask it in a formal way. You would have to ask for that amendment to place that document as the timeline criteria yeah, but that is possible. And we can do that in the meeting if you want to do that.
I guess at this point, I would like to ask for an amendment to add in every 2-week reviews at the minimum.
Is there a second for that amendment?
I'll second
that.
I'll call for discussion on that amendment.
Will the review mean an every 2-week meeting by the entire board, by steering? What does that look like?
I believe we already voted that Cassie would bring to steering, right? Moving from phase to phase. So where we would have the opportunity to potentially, right, either call for unanimous consent, and then if not, right, it goes to the, by a certain time, then we have a quick meeting and then we have to bring it forward. I thought we kind of talked about that maybe during steering.
We did, but we didn't give a timeline. And what Leah's proposing is that those reviews have a specific timeline.
I'd like to call on Alan. He's got his hand raised.
Thank you, Sarah.
I was just going to give you a suggestion. If you want to have some kind of a time frame, you could have a motion or tied to your vote that you want to follow this time frame as long as it's within the guidelines of the district, and that you want to as fully implement that as possible within the district parameters. So like, for example, if the district, let's say, is on pause for hybrid and you really can't get to phase 4 to bring more kids in, you're just kind of stuck there without having to keep coming back to vote on it until the district opens up more.
Dan?
I don't oppose having some frequency written into the plan. I would say if each of these phases is really expected to be on average about a week and a half, 2 weeks, whatever it is, I would say the review ought to be, because we need to be giving our professionals, so Cassie and her staff, the ability to be nimble. And if they want to go forward, they should be able to go forward without having it to be reviewed. If they feel like they need another week in a phase, they should get another week. So I guess I would say, in my opinion, we would do it every 3 weeks. And that's really to give them that leeway, right? We don't need to, between this review and the next, every 2 weeks is micromanaging our professionals at that point. And if they feel like they can move us to a next phase faster before a meeting happens, then they should be able to do that. If they feel like they need that extra time because the kids aren't picking up the habits that are necessary in order to be successful, then give them that week. And then 3 weeks has gone by, that's a week more than the average phase time, assuming there hasn't been a stop by the district. Then at that point, it's fair for steering to have that conversation and say, do we need to give the staff and Cassie a nudge and have them explain to us why they're extending it beyond that 3 weeks? But
I would say that's a fair assessment. So if they're able to move forward before that 2 weeks, and that's something that we're able to write in, like they can move forward without a vote, but after a certain amount of time, we're going to meet to nudge them forward. I think that would be that 3 weeks to have the board review it, or having the steering committee review it at least is.
Right. I want to be clear. I shouldn't have said nudge, because honestly, what we would need is to hear from them why they're not moving forward, right? And it would have to be compelling.
Right.
But at the same time, I don't want it to be like if they go 3 weeks, boom, then I don't want it written such that we're taking away that professional autonomy that they deserve.
Sarah, could you pull the document up now? Because we need to have the language, please.
Yep, we're looking at the alternative model here.
Yes, thank you. Can you find the spot where it says the amendment that steering added? Yeah, number 8. So Leah, you proposed that we would use the timeline document to conduct regular reviews in consultation with steering. Is that what, I'm just trying to get your exact language down. I'm sorry. I tried to write it down and I didn't get it all.
No, you're fine. It's 9:30 at night. I don't know that I'm going to be very eloquent about my speech either. So I guess I would propose do you want my original proposal or what? Yeah, so I had proposed that we add an amendment to follow the timeline set forth by Cassie, and if that timeline isn't being followed, that the board or the steering committee would review.
And I would propose to add to that language Dr. Brandt's suggestion that we can follow that timeline as long to the degree that we can within the guidelines of the district, so that we're not held up. I mean, that's what my addition to this discussion is.
So is that a formal motion, or is that you're just proposing that for discussion right now?
I'm proposing that for discussion.
I think that's a fair addition.
So I'll bring it up as a formal amendment to the amendment that added to this. We follow the timeline set forth by Cassie. Steering will review if the timeline is not being followed as much as can be within the guidelines of the district. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
So this is still open for a discussion.
Would we want to try to align, if we wanted to choose dates, want to align that to our thought process that we talked about in steering, where, have the administrator come to us on a Friday, call for steering for unanimous consent, give us the weekend to review, and then have to respond by Monday. But, I don't know if there would be any language that we would need to do to kind of align that whole Friday weekend to think, let somebody know by Monday by noon if we object to the recommendation, from the administrator. And then we would have to then go to our procedure as far as steering and then full board.
To clarify, would they be coming to you for approval in moving forward in the plan?
Oh, that's what you wanted to add, wasn't it? That they can move forward without any review, correct, Leah?
Yeah, I think that giving that professional ability is important. They know what's going on in the school, so allowing them to move forward without review, I think, is fair.
I don't know if I'm allowed to talk.
Sorry, Cassie, you are not a voting member, but you are a member of the board. So you are free to talk without being called on by a board member.
Great. So just some things to keep in mind. Things take time, and we're talking about, we have to reach out to the family. We have to get the response back. The family has to make arrangements. So I do agree that allowing us to move forward with bringing in students would be, the right move to not have to get all of that approved. The other thing that we need to consider is some people might want to pull back to the virtual space. So there's going to be maybe some shifting. And although I appreciate the idea of the timelines and part of why I set it out the more, guidelines and micromanaging that we put on this, the harder it's going to make it for all of us. There's also something to be said about like, part of the reason why we don't have a timeline is so that we don't get stuck in something that we don't want to be stuck in. So our intention is to get the students in as soon as we can, and as soon as we, get our routines in and get things safely. And that's why I really like the idea of through phase 2, we're adding the students in as much as we can. And then once we want to add another cohort of students, we'll let steering know, but that could be depending on what the parents need. They might say like, yes, I want to come, but I don't want to come for another week or another 2 weeks. I don't want to have any sort of trouble with that we're not bringing students because of the family's needs, so I think that if we go back to the idea of between the 2 phases, and maybe you add another one of between 3 and 4, if that helps you. But those are my thoughts.
Okay, seeing no hands raised, I'll ask for us to vote on the amendment to the amendment first, which is that we added to the amendment language is that as much as can be within the timeline of the district. I will do roll calls on these. Derek? Derek, are you muted?
Oh, did that not work? Okay,
Sorry.
yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Stephanie? No. Leah?
Yes.
Kayla?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Paige?
Yes.
Nicole? Oh, I'm sorry. Nicole and Ashley will need to abstain from voting on this model because of conflict of interest. So Nicole, can you state that? Ashley?
Same.
And Nicole, can I come back to you?
Trying to unmute. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, same.
Thank you. All right, that amendment carries. Now we vote on the original amendment that Leah brought forth, which is to follow the timeline. Set forth by Cassie. Steering will review according to this timeline as much as can be within the timeline of the district. To hold, but not to move forward. Correct? I need to read that again.
Can we see it? The timeline, Stephanie?
Who had the timeline?
Cassie does.
Kathy does. Thank you. Okay, so let me state that again. In order to not move to a phase, to follow the timeline set forth by Cassie, the steering will review as much as can be within the timeline and guidelines of the guidelines of the district. Yes, is that what we're saying? This sounds very messy.
Maybe if you can dumb it down for me, I guess I don't understand.
Hold on, I will not use the chat, but I have to, is this awful? I have to type in order to think these days to get it. Okay. And Leah, you can let me know if this is what you were saying.
I know we're at the voting portion versus discussion, but am I allowed to ask one more question?
Yeah.
Cassie, is there any option to move, because I noticed that phase 3 to phase 4, it was noted a 3-week, and phase 2 to phase 3 was noted a 2-week. Is there any option to make them the same so they're both 3 weeks? Since we're voting to approve.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, this is just a draft of something I started working on so we could do a to-do list for the teachers. You know, I would probably suggest the first phase be 3 weeks. Still could get to phase 4 by spring break.
Is this what, can everybody see this chat? I'm sorry that I can't screen share tonight. I apologize. And I will have somebody move this into something that can be screen shared.
Can I share it in the chat here? Will it still show up?
Yes, you should be able to put it into the document, Sarah, and that would be easier for folks.
Okay. See. I'm going to do my best. Bear with me, please. This type of technology is, yes.
Sarah, you should be able to pull your chat window right into the screen you're sharing, and it should show up.
Yeah.
Can you see it now?
No.
No.
Matt, could you try to share your chat screen? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so that would be the language that's being asked for in this amendment. In order to hold from, so this is the vote, and I've called the vote, but I wanted to have the language down. In order to hold from moving from a phase to a phase, according to the timeline outlined by the admin must review with steering as long as the move is within the guidelines of the district.
So to be clear, are we stuck then with the proposed, or would Cassie be allowed to have 3 weeks for each phase?
You would have to amend the amendment.
I would like to propose an amendment that we ask, sorry, this is my first time amending anything. I would like to propose an amendment that we adjust the administration's outline to change the phase 2 from 2 weeks to 3 weeks.
I would second that.
There's a second. That amendment is open for discussion.
So technically Sarah gets first crack at that.
Yeah, I really felt that Cassie expressed right away at the very beginning of our meeting that she specifically asked for 3, that she was willing to give a compromise. And I feel that our teachers and our administration has been doing everything that they can to serve our students. I want to give them the time that they need to serve our students in the best way they know how.
And I like this because it also does not take away the ability to move faster if they feel like they can be moving faster.
Yes.
All right, seeing no hands raised, I will ask for a vote on this amendment to change the timeline for all of them to 3 weeks.
Call for
Derek,
unanimous consent.
I think we have to do a roll call. Dan, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Derek?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Stephanie? Yes. Leah?
Yes.
Kayla?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Paige?
Yes.
Nicole?
Dane.
Ashley?
Dane.
Thank you. The motion carries. We're now returning to the original amendment. I will call for the vote on the original amendment, which now includes a 3-week timeline for all phases. Derek?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Stephanie? No. Leah?
Yes.
Kayla?
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Paige,
Yes.
Nicole, Nicole. Yeah, now we can.
Okay, abstain.
Ashley.
Abstain.
Okay. The original motion is up for discussion.
I know that there's some apprehension at possibly holding the staff to a timeline and being able to give them the freedom to move as they need to. But I do think that it's important that we still have this ability to check in and keep them in check if things aren't progressing. We have a lot of families who feel that we should be on par with where the district is, and by giving the opportunity to check in with the staff members if they're not moving towards what the district is doing, I think that's going to account for a lot of what our community is looking for.
Other questions, comments, concerns?
Just that we discussed something very similar to this at steering, and we backed off a bit, but agreed, Leah. There's an awful lot of people who were saying, "Where's the timeline? Where's the timeline?" And in our discussion, we were saying it's a fluid situation. We don't know what we're responding to. But if this is going to make parents feel more comfortable with it, it's not that much more work for anybody, I don't think. So, makes sense to me.
Okay, so we're open to a discussion for the model. I'm not seeing any more hands raised. Have I missed anybody? Paige, thank you. Sorry.
Just one quick question, and just, I know that the district they shut it down, but they were gonna do that A.M. P.M. thing. And I think part of the reason was like, lunch and recess being maybe an issue and kids being together at those times. Cassie, do you guys have plans for, if kids are there all day, like plans for what they're doing for lunch or for recess?
I'm really glad you asked that. So if the district doesn't go back, we can't do a full day because I won't have lunch service. If they do go back, I would have lunch service. And I mean, we can be creative, but we don't have that plan totally solidified yet. I think we want to bring the students back for as long as they can and as long as they need, trying to give them what they need.
Can I get a clarifying, I guess, question here, Cassie? You just said that if the district doesn't go back, we would not be able to go back full time. So even in this, our gradual approach of the virtual plus option, you're saying that would not be full time if the district chooses not to go back full time?
I think I'll recognize Al Brandt to speak to this.
I believe if you are invoking and bringing back some kids for virtual plus, every school site has discretion in terms of, are you bringing kids back for part of a day or a full day? It's a matter of how you can staff it and what the expectations are. And I think, the food service piece, right now you don't have any programming, so that's why you don't have food service. But if let's say in your first phase in a virtual plus setting, if let's say hybrid isn't starting for the district, Chartwell's would provide, some bagged lunches and breakfasts. Let's say you're bringing in 20 kids for your virtual plus to start on January 19th, they would provide some bagged breakfasts and lunches. That's what they've been doing at my site for our Classroom Connection kids and for some of the EL students that we've brought in our virtual plus.
Thank you, Al. I appreciate that.
But I think Derek's question was a little bit different, though. It was part of that. But could you clarify that there are still limitations that the district has, even as they've opened up part of the
limitation is you won't be able to exceed 30% of your total population. So you can bring back, let's say, 20 kids and keep adding to that in the virtual plus scenario, but you can't exceed 30%. So if your school has 200 kids, you're capped at 600 or 60 kids.
But we could choose full, all day, as long as we don't surpass the 30% threshold.
Right.
And
So
we
you
would
could-
have lunch provided through that service that you had talked about.
Correct. So you theoretically could bring in, 30 kids in the morning and 30 kids in the afternoon to avoid that whole middle of the day scenario. And that's partially why, there was that proposal by the district for all of the schools. But, you could say, nope, we're gonna do all day, full day. You just have to bear in mind that it's impacting the staff as well. So, as you're bringing in more kids for bigger chunks of time, now we're shifting teacher time and some focus, and now they're balancing both trying to support kids virtually and kids in person potentially, especially if you haven't hit that critical mass from what I'm hearing in your early, is it child house or whatever, and group 1 or whatever. If you have in the bigger model, if you have half the group that's virtual with one teacher and half the group in person, if you're not quite there yet, you're going to have people trying to do both at the same time.
So Derek, that's how I understood. That's why phase 2 was the staff's recommendation for that. So though that 20 kids in the 20, maybe Cassie, you should speak to this. I'm sorry, but that's why you had a virtual plus model and that was phase 2, correct?
Right.
Which was and the description is around about 20 kids in that afternoon session time.
Right. And now from what I'm learning, so again, we're all learning. I was worried that we wouldn't have lunch service. Sounds like we might have an opportunity for lunch service, and then they could have an option to be all day. But if the district goes back, that option is there for sure. I was worried about if the district didn't go back, if we would have that option, but it sounds like we will. So thanks, Al.
Are you planning to do lunch in the classroom, or are your kids going to be moving through the halls, or have you planned that out yet?
That's still in the works. As they're talking about bringing more students in, there's some different ideas out there. So we're waiting to hear if each building will have autonomy to choose or not, is what I'm waiting for.
Just to clarify, for this virtual plus, is that 30% total, or is that 30% at one time? So if you were to split it and do AM and PM, could you possibly be serving all of our families that want to be in person?
It's 30% in total.
Okay.
So for example, like at the high school level, 30% includes the kids that might be coming on the campus after school for athletics. That's part of their total 30%.
Point of order. I'm not trying to be a pain, but technically we're exceeding our half hour again. And as timekeeper, I'm supposed to let you know that.
Thank you, timekeeper. I'll call for an extension of time of 30-minute increment and a stretch break. No, we won't get up, but I will make you stretch.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Can I call for universal consent? Motion carries. We are extended in time. Thank you, timekeeper. I would just like I think this is why I appreciated the phased in approach, because it did take into account some flexibility in bringing in children who need to be in person and serving them while attending to the needs of the virtual students in some form. though there would be compromise, as there would be very little afternoon time for the teachers in phase 2 and 3, which is why that piece on universal instruction in the morning is important for me to pay attention to. Right. So this is the point at which we do have to think about how the admin and staff have considered a plan that brings in children appropriately. Okay. Thank you for those points of clarification. Are there any more points of discussion, concern? Okay. Hearing none. Is that Heather? Is it Heather Schwartz? Do you want to be called on? Heather from the board? I have 3 Heathers on my screen. I'm sorry.
It's not me, Heather Schwartz.
Okay. All right. All right. So are there any further questions? Otherwise, I will move to call the vote. Derek, do you have your hand up?
I do. So the Heather that might not be on the board, I'm going to recognize her.
Thank you,
sounds
Derek.
like maybe
That's
she has comments to go ahead. So I'd like to hear that.
Heather, did you posted something in chat, but we needed audio, or I guess a board member can recognize to read something at this point in time.
I can just read it.
Thank you, Leah.
Her question is the phased in approach independent of the 30% of kids who are targeted or with needs? So if we do not vote in the phased in approach, I think is her question, are we still able to do virtual plus?
Does our vote, I believe our vote goes back then to the, what was it, September plan? So
Right.
it would not include, is that right? It would not include then the targeted support?
That's my understanding.
Cassie, is that your understanding from the district?
Well, we could probably come to you with another plan. I guess I'm getting confused about like what this question is asking.
So I think from a board from a board understanding, my answer would be that I think at this point, if we were to not pass the phased in approach, it would require another plan and another vote in order to begin phase 2, essentially, which is virtual plus.
Right. And we would still recommend beginning there?
Yeah.
So I know tonight there's a lot of discussion regarding the phased in approach. I would be remiss if we also didn't talk about, right, the option of not doing that and going back to the school district's option of, as of right now, right, 5 days a week for K through 4 and our 5s and 6 on that AB aspect. And there are some in our community who are ready to bring their kids back. So I also want people to be thoughtful of that. And we, in steering, absolutely were thoughtful. But tonight's discussion has really been geared towards massaging just one side of that story. And I also want to make sure that the other side of the story has some thought with this. As I feel that it is a little one-sided, which is fine because this is a live working meeting. And this is what we were planning on doing with us because of the curveball that they threw us after we last met. But I think we should be thoughtful for even having some sort of open discussion about, well, do we let the kids come back? and what people's thoughts are.
Can I chime in on that?
Yeah, you have the floor, Leah. Sorry.
So to be completely honest, so I have an interesting perspective because we have already made the decision that we are taking our two youngest children to a neighborhood school so that they can begin 5 days a week as of January 19th, because we feel that that meets our needs better. So I'll still have an E2 child at A.P.M. But I can understand where a phased-in approach does better match a Montessori concept and our need for our staffing needs. So while I can appreciate that we do have community members who want to rip off the Band-Aid and do 5 days a week, I can definitely still understand why a phased-in approach is appropriate for A.P.M. I don't know if that what that says, but
Sarah?
I guess on the side of, I hear what you're saying. I do understand that family members want to get their kids back in school. I want my kids back in school. No, I need them back in school. But I would agree. I really feel like the phase-in model is more appropriate for A.P.M. I feel it's more appropriate for our children. I don't know. I've observed from my own kids that when they are given things gradually and given the chance to learn a bit at a time, it works better for them. And I see that in adults too, that we all need a little bit of time to adjust. And I feel like the phased-in approach does that a little bit better. And I think that's why it maybe felt more one-sided in the discussion.
Dan?
I just want to reiterate, I agree with Sarah and what Leah said around it being the right model Montessori-wise. But even beyond that, I think when we look at the survey results of parents being very pleased with the teachers, and we hear the praise from the community, from people on both, again, both sides of this discussion, I think we hear the drumbeat that we trust our teachers. And I really want us to go back to, they're not recommending the districts, rip the Band-Aid off methodology. These professional Montessori teachers whom we trust, and I think we rightfully praise often, deserve our trust in this. We all want to do what's best for our kids, and we all desperately want our kids back in school as soon as possible. But if they're telling me that a phased-in approach is the most appropriate developmentally for the kids who have experienced Montessori learning methodology in the past, and they're the Montessori experts, I'm going to trust their weighted input. And I would encourage all the rest of you to do the same and vote yay for the phased-in approach.
Matt?
I think it also, I don't know if this has come out in this meeting, but I know that in the steering meeting, again, we talked about, the teachers are aware of many of the students who are struggling, and parents have contacted them and said, hey, this isn't working for me. And so in this first virtual plus model, I suspect, I don't know if it will be all, I don't know what the list is. I don't know how many there are, but we were told, and Cassie, I'll ask for your clarification, that the vast majority of people and kids who either the teachers have identified as needing some extra in-person time, or parents have called and said, holy cow, this is no good. Those kids are on the initial list, so that a lot of the really tough stories that we've heard will hopefully be immediately addressed. Should we pass this plan here tonight? And yeah, Cassie, if you can just confirm or deny that I'm correct on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's no official list right now, but I guess what I said to you at steering is the teachers who have identified students who they would want to bring in because of our criteria overlap many of the stories that we've heard of the parents saying that they're seeing those struggles at home.
Michelle?
Muted here. I've had a million thoughts going through my head all week. So, but for me, I think the bottom line comes down to there isn't a definite from the district yet. And I really like that this plan gives us a definite and gives our community a plan. It may not be what everybody wants right away, but it's something. And I feel better about having something that is going to hold up regardless, because this back and forth and changing of plans and impossible deadlines is not healthy for anyone, certainly not us as a community. So for me, I appreciate that part of the plan, that regardless of what the district decides, we have something in place and we can move forward instead of kind of staying in a status quo. The other thing I heard tonight to take in consideration, I think, is what Jody said. When I send my kids to school, I want my teachers to be as prepared as possible. I want them to feel confident in what they are doing, and I want them to be prepared. We're sending our kids back. Every one of our kids is coming back with some kind of issue, some more traumatic than others. And so that spoke to me, what she said about just on her end, she's going to be the caretaker of my child for how many of her hours. And I want them to be confident and be in a place where they can do the best job possible. And so if doing a phase in is what needs to happen, I appreciate that as well.
Have I missed anybody's hands? Okay, can I call for this vote? I will call the vote, hearing no objections. Derek?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Stephanie? Yes. Leah?
Yes.
Kayla?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Paige?
Yes.
Nicole?
Abstain.
Ashley?
Abstain.
The motion carries unanimously. Or not with abstentions, sorry. What time is it? Okay. All right.
Madam President,
Yes,
I would like to make a motion to the body that we table the remainder of the agenda. The rest of the items are committee work and administrators' reports, steering committee reports, and other agenda items. I believe everyone has added their notes to the report. Unless we have objection, I would encourage us to move to table that and adjourn.
is there a second?
I'll second.
I second.
I do have to add just one point of discussion, since we're open for discussion then. There are just a few outstanding committee reports. If you could please get that to Matt as soon as possible so that they can be in our agenda minutes. Then I am completely fine with tabling the rest of the meeting to our written documents. And I'm going to call for unanimous consent on that one. Hearing no objection, I call for the meeting to be adjourned. And I thank you all so much for your hours of review, for your commitment to our community, to hear from them, to continue to reach out. And I echo the many words shared today by many of you, that this is a really difficult time for all of us. And I know we are better together. And so I thank you for continuing to show up and do this work. All of you, parents, families, teachers, administrators, educators, I thank you so much. And I will adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.